Welcome to Michigan Reimagined, presented by Good Marketing and Wagoner Financial. And here's your host, Chris Buck.
So Michigan and mid-Michigan have been virtually flat in population for decades. A recent study shows that Michigan is projected to shrink while the Lansing region is slated to grow some. But is this all encouraging news? Here to share the important details of this study is the COO of LEAP, the Lansing Economic Area Partnership, Mr. Keith Lambert. Welcome back to the show, Keith.
Chris, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
I'm really glad to have you here, too, because this is probably one of the most important studies that I've seen in a really long time. As an economic developer, I mean, you're knee deep in this, and I'm periphery to it. But I've lived in this space for a while, and I'm not from Michigan, right? So I moved here in 2008, and I had my impressions coming in, and I complained a little bit about what we didn't have, and then turned the corner and became one of the advocates, and battle daily with the social media trolls who are opposed to everything. And now we've got this study that talks a little bit about Michigan, and we can get into the brand, and we can get into, the perspective that people around the country and the world have of Michigan and what's being done on that. But let's talk a little. Well, first, let's start with LEAP. For those not familiar, what is LEAP? Your organization, what is your mission, and what do you do?
Yeah, so LEAP is a regional economic development organization. We are responsible for the Lansing region, as we call it, Ingham County, Eaton County, and Clinton County. We are blessed to be a metropolitan statistical area, which basically means we're a local economy. Flow of goods, services, people is kind of contained to the region that we serve, which is nice. A lot of our counterparts around the state have much bigger regions.
Right.
We can drive anywhere in our region in 30, 35 minutes versus hours. So it's pretty contained. We know each other, and we're working on a lot of things in regionalism together. But then there's still the township city dynamics and things like that. But LEAP, in terms of its service, it's all really about building a more prosperous region and building inclusive prosperity and wealth opportunities. That means good jobs. That means helping people start up businesses. That means a lot of that is attracting new investment into the region. So new to market companies that are landing here for the first time, LEAP's usually involved in that. We also do a lot of community-based projects, whether it's housing, mixed use, place-making sort of public space activation. We do all that too. So it kind of spans the gamut. We're pretty holistic in our approach. We see it as, the big projects, the skyline, the industrial plants, things like that are kind of the brick. And then the people, the innovation, culture, the diversity of our region, the people and developing the people, childcare, housing, all the things that make people able to have a happy and productive life here. That's kind of the mortar. So we try to, cater to both those things.
Makes a lot of sense. So I talked a little bit about the Michigan population trend. I am true in that Michigan's been plus or minus 10 million in population forever. Right.
It's an easy thing to remember because it's been so, just over, then just under.
But why is that problematic? Because a lot of my arguments with people, debates and conversations on social media in particular, or even face-to-face, when new things are proposed, at its core, the opposition tends to be, and I think that's probably the same around the country, is I'm scared of change.
Right.
I don't want things to change. I don't want to grow. I don't want to be really hectic and busy like a Chicago. I want things to kind of stay the way they are. Why is staying the way we are problematic?
That's a really good question. And it kind of gets into the human psyche a little bit about like what does staying where we are or the status quo or like what does it mean to not change? And the reality is everything's at a state of change all the time. And when it comes to things like communities, if we're not, I think of it as like a leaky bucket. I don't know if you've ever heard this metaphor, but the idea that there's, some holes in a bucket and, things are naturally, even just the simple human life cycle of birth and death, right? Like everyone, that's what happens. And if you're not doing with that bucket, there's going to be leaks. People are going to leave. People are going to pass away. And if you're not refilling the bucket, or patching those holes where possible with policy and activities and strategies in economic development, government services, education, whatever, that's basically like the community will all of a sudden have less water. And the water level could be seen as economic activity. It could be seen as tax base if you look at it from a government's perspective. But that's always happening. And we don't get to decide whether or not that's happening. And if we think we do, if we think we're just going to not do anything and stay the same, we're actually relatively declining versus everybody else. Because that's not what the rest of the state's doing. That's not what the rest of the country's doing. That's not what the world is doing, right? Everything's in a state of flux, a state of change. And if we're not, capturing opportunities, even just having, populations are a good example. You can't just stay the same with population because it's always changing, and we'll get into the characteristics of that. But even if your overall population isn't changing, you're aging, you're getting younger, you're getting more diverse, you're getting less diverse. Like there's always going to be change because we don't control that. It's just our state of being basically, in a community's state of being or a region.
Right. I heard someone who's been in this world for a long time just says you're basically either evolving and growing or you're dying.
Yeah.
Staying still is a death spiral.
Right. Yeah.
So because the bucket does leak.
Right.
And you always need to be on offense.
Exactly.
And again, we can get into this. Not all development is good development.
Right.
And so
that's very true.
It's not just turn on the faucet and let anything flow through.
Right.
But
yeah, you got to be tactical.
And,
you got to be tactical, but like we're always in that state of change, and it's a very competitive world out there. And if our best and brightest getting educated at our local schools, which are phenomenal, Lansing Community College, MSU, Davenport, all of that, like we have great higher ed institutions.
Yep.
But if we're not building a compelling community, fewer of them choose to stay. And then people looking to relocate their lives for jobs or just to find a cool place, like Lansing needs to be in that list for them, right?
Yep.
Because if we're not, then they don't come here, and then again, you don't stay the same, you decline.
Right.
And no one wants decline because that has all sorts of other things that come along with it that aren't good for anybody.
And I want to talk about that because that needs to be told.
Right.
And I don't think people see that. But the study itself, I mean, who commissioned it? Where did it come from? Is it a statewide thing where Lansing's a chapter, or did Lansing do it and comparing Lansing to the state?
It was two kind of key things that were running in parallel. So one was Governor Whitmer brought together this Growing Michigan Together Council, which I think has kind of wrapped its mandate. But they did a lot of interesting research from the state demographers about just the state as a whole, and that we were thinking about that from a regional perspective because it was somewhat dire. It was looking at like 2% loss of the state population through 2050. And then we were just, we were hearing about that and understanding, even before that report came out, I think at the end of 24, we were just talking about like, we know we're aging. We know fertility rates are dropping. Like we've heard all this stuff. That's national. That's around the world, even in a lot of developed countries. So we were just starting to think about, if we don't have population growth, at least at like some sort of modest level, it makes a lot of other things a lot harder. So we ran our own data set through, it was MZ, now it's owned by Lightcast. So we pulled like basically industry leading comps on data, which comes from Census, ACS and all that. And they project out 10 years. And we were looking at like basically 2024 to 2034. And it was predicting like somewhat catastrophic loss but it didn't make sense either. So the assumptions with forecasting is, but basically we were like, we need to dig into this because this is what site consultants are depending on to help industry executives decide where to locate.
Yep.
Like even if the data set was wrong, it's still a baseline that a lot of people use. So we wanted to set the record straight at a minimum and also get a better understanding of where we're really at. So LEAP commissioned public sector consultants to do a very broad-based population study that really picked apart regional level, yes, but also county level and municipal level. So we gave them a list of 15 municipalities. So we really wanted to have sort of micro data sets as much as available too, and look at school districts, look at tax revenue, look at a lot of things that are maybe not conventionally thought of, but we see them all as really interconnected. And it was looking at 2010 through 2023 as like sort of a recent data set, and then also predicting 2025 through 2050. So forecasting things out through 2050 wherever possible. And it was very interesting. And we just had that kind of wrap last fall, and now we've been communicating it out to all the different individual communities as well as counties, and just recently getting the private sector and broader community more engaged in it. And we're looking forward to other avenues to sharing information in the next couple months. Right
on. Okay, so we're still trying to target 2050. And after all of that has been done, what is the expectation for Mid-Michigan's population between now and 2050?
Yeah, and 2050, just for reference, it was used because it was kind of what the state was already doing.
Okay. Yep.
So that was why it was like our end game, because we wanted to have a comp to what the state's experiencing, which is that 2% loss over the same period. So our region is about 480,000 people today, the Tri-County area, and we are predicted through 2050 to go up to 508,000 people, which is just under 6% growth. Which without context, it's like, oh, that sounds pretty good, especially in a state that's losing 2% population over the same time. And you might think that, but then if you look at what does that mean like on an annual basis over that 25 years, it's only like 0.1 to 0.2% growth. And I think it's about 1,100 people. So and then you go down to per day, that's like 3 new people per day. And as a comp, because we have to look at like, well, what are our peer regions' experience? We talk about Grand Rapids a lot. They've done a lot of good things right in West Michigan and the Grand Rapids area. They're projected to grow 14% over the same period of time. And
more than double.
Yeah. And then, so that's another, I mean, they're in state, right? That's
a percentage of growth, not net people.
That's not, yeah, exactly right.
Yep.
It's over that 25 years, 14% there. And then Greenville, South Carolina, another comp that we're competing with them for projects. Atesteo was in direct competition there. We have another project right now that we're in direct competition with Greenville, South Carolina. They come up a lot in like sort of the Southeast as a manufacturing hub. They're projected to grow 30% over the same period of time. Madison, Wisconsin, projected to grow 50% over the same period of time. So you start to think about our 5.8%, and it's in that context of like, these are peer regions that have a capital city and or a Big Ten university or other big university. And so they have similar base assets, and yet they're on a whole different trajectory than us. Even Grand Rapids is, looking at the nation as a whole is 7% over the same period. So we're also a little bit lower than the national projection, which is at that data set level, that's a pretty good guess of where the nation's going to be. So again, when you think about relative decline, right, we're going to be dropping down versus the nation most likely, and even much more so against some of our peer regions. So that's a good way, I think, to think about population overall. It's positive in some ways. You can work with that, but it's not. It's going to bring us further behind some of the other regions that we compare ourselves to.
Got it. Well, let me give a nod to our friends at Good Marketing. Here at Michigan Reimagine, we tell stories of passionate Michiganders like Keith Lambert doing great things across the state. Today's podcast sponsor, Good Marketing, helps organizations tell those stories in powerful and measurable ways. As a behavior change accelerator, Good partners with mission-driven clients to inspire action, shift mindsets, and strengthen communities. From advancing affordable housing to protecting natural resources and expanding education and workforce opportunities, their work moves Michigan forward. See how they're helping shape Michigan's future at goodmarketing.com. That's GUD marketing.com. So, but not all population is the same.
Right.
Right. And I think that that's really another major headline that needs to be discussed. Right. So our 6% growth and the nation's 7% growth could be wildly different. Or the 50% of the people that are going to go grow Madison, Wisconsin are made up of a different demographic than the 6 people that are coming to Lansing.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about what that means and why that's important.
Yeah. So we always kind of debate the absolute change and then thinking about it relatively. Like we lead with that because that is kind of the overall. But then you look at the characteristics of the change. And I mentioned earlier, fertility rates dropping. In the next few years, the nation as a whole is, I think it's 2031 is the first time we're expected to see on the average that there's more deaths than births in the country. But it's coming. It's in the 2030s for sure. And like that's the natural population circumstance, which means the only way to grow your population is in migration.
Community of choice. You have to be a community of choice.
And if you get the sort of double benefit of if you're able to have people, community of choice, people move that are then starting families, then your fertility rate at a local regional level is also higher, right? So like that, it's kind of a double whammy. If you can bring in people basically in their 20s and 30s that are thinking about starting a family, you get this sort of double benefit, which also has a big impact on local schools and things. But the reality is in the country, the natural population will be decreasing. So it's going to be more kind of cutthroat competition than ever for talent. We talk about, the talent retention and attraction is super important, and they pick their communities, and more people are doing that. My sister has a fully remote job that's based in DC, but she lives in Idaho and is looking at relocating to Michigan, right? Like people can do that now. That's like very typical in a post-pandemic world. So talent is more mobile than ever, and we need to build a compelling place and also have job opportunities, kind of the mix of both to be really competitive and compelling. And we have the assets to do that, but we're not fully capturing that at this point, I'd say.
Right. We'll get into kind of the NIMBYism and maybe the bananas, which I just uncovered in my one seminar about what that means.
To hit on the characteristics of change, aging is the big trend, right? Yep. That was the kind of the baseline question you asked. And the biggest thing with an aging population is, from 2010 to 2023, we lost 12% of our school age population. So from kids 5 to 19. 12% just in that short period of time. We're expected to lose another 15% through 2050. So you're looking at from 2010 to 2050, a 27% loss of school-age kids. That hits enrollment. That hits, school districts and individual buildings of elementary, especially in the earlier, where there's not enough kids, there's not enough tax base, there's not enough financial resources to keep that school open. So you have issues where, and this is, very disparate across school districts, as you can imagine.
Sure.
Some of them from 2010 to 2023 lost up to 30% of their school population, just in that very recent history, not projected at all. So like you get to start talking about school closures and district consolidations and things that are really scary and nobody wants to talk about. But it's like that's the reality either today in some instances or more and more through 2050. So that's a big deal. We're going to lose 14,000 school-age kids through 2050. We're also going to lose 10,000 young workers in their 20s, 30s, and 40s through 2050. Wow. So we lose those two big, important demographics while gaining 30,000 seniors over 65. Particularly EMS runs are a good example because that's already happening. EMS runs in DeWitt Township, it was in our press release. Don't quote me on the number, but I think it was something like 40% increase in the last 10 years of EMS runs. And the tax base to pay for that has been flat, right? So it's like, how do we need to hire more, we need to bring on more, ambulances, we need to hire more people in that, which are also, by the way, EMS workers, pay has gone up in a commensurate way over the same period.
And they're
of time.
hard to find.
Yeah, they're hard to find. Training, to get them, to keep them. So that's a competitive landscape, and yet the tax base there has been just about flat, maybe increasing very marginally. So like that just doesn't work, right? Like there's not enough money to do that, and you need more at-home care. Who's typically doing that? People in their 20s. Well, if we have fewer people in our 20s, but for the MSU population, which is God willing, will be stable at least in terms of being in town. But you get to this, like the aging characteristics, they just don't work. They don't work for the school districts. They don't work for local government services that need to support the elderly. Like that just doesn't, it's not sustainable. So there needs to be an answer, and like there's no way to do that without expanding the tax base.
And talking about the tax base, so I mean, if you really kind of think that through, it's obviously, kids who aren't working yet don't pay taxes, right? So, your tax is based on your income.
Right.
And so the income is going to be between your 30s and 50s, pretty much, people in their 20s are starting out and not, making a lot of money, right?
Transition to fixed income, right?
Right. You're right.
Contribute taxes in a different way.
The people that are between 40 and 55 right now, when we fast forward, their income's going to fall off and their taxes are going to go down, and they're not going to be replaced by as many people.
Exactly.
In that, I mean, the way things go, if we do nothing, obviously there's hopefully a strategy to try to change the course of what they're telling us is going to happen. But you lose the robust part of your tax base through outbound migration.
Exactly.
And then the people that are making good money now who decide to stay because the hooks are in on them are going to retire and make less money and contribute less taxes. So we have an increased need in services with a decrease. I mean, you said flat, but taxes are going to go down if nothing changes.
Right.
So the alternative is, with not reckless abandon, because that sounds reckless, but we need to fight to get people to want to move to Michigan and move to the Lansing region, or we need to change our tax code to tax those who are here higher.
Yes.
To make up the shortfall.
That's exactly it. We kind of look at it as there's you increase taxes on your existing population to keep services the same,
which causes
people to leave.
Right.
And then if you have fewer people, you need to tax them relatively more for the same services.
Right.
So that's a death spiral.
Right.
The other death spiral is, okay, well, we can't raise taxes. People won't
vote for me.
We'll get voted out of office and everything. So the other option is you make cuts. But then you have fewer services, lower quality of life, all sorts of issues. The EMS times go up, and like that's not. Then people don't choose to stay in the community or relocate to the community. That's a death cycle too, right? Because then you have fewer people, and you need to cut more and cut more and cut more. So like, those things just don't work over a longer frame of time. And that's, I mean, I got a 2-year-old. We just celebrated her birthday, and it's like this stuff matters, like for our futures. And I know I've talked to a lot of people where, they talk about how their kids don't live in Michigan anymore. And it's like, I know, I get it. And like a lot of people want to change that, but like we have to do something here. Like Michigan's just such a beautiful state. It's such a compelling place to be.
Yes.
And we can help people experience that, but like we have to figure out our systems and policies to, like how are Indiana and Ohio kicking our butts every day? Like
right.
it grinds my gears. I can't even tell you. We see it all the time. The semiconductor, the battery related stuff. They're on I-80 is what, Bob will talk about the logistical advantages, from basically the Northeast to Chicago. And like, I get it, but like, look at Michigan. Like it's a phenomenal place.
Right.
Right. Like it's the quality of life here, the lakes, everything we have going for us, and the higher ed, like MSU and U of M, not to mention, Wayne State, Michigan Tech. We have phenomenal higher ed institutions here. So like we have the assets, we have the natural beauty, we have all these things. We just got to figure out, what systems wise and policy wise is not working and make it better.
Right.
So that's why we're doing this 2030 strategy, focusing on a 2050 vision that is kind of related to this population stuff. It's a really big deal because we have to alter our trajectory, and it's not easy to do that.
No kidding. And you mentioned outbound migration of college-age students, and I've said for a while, certainly that's a piece of the pie and a part of the formula that we can maybe mitigate that, But I also think it's human nature that kids coming out of college want to spread their wings.
Yep.
And I find that a lot of Michigan universities are made up of Michigan-based kids. And so, the kid who wants to go to Chicago or Colorado or North Carolina or Nashville or Austin, Texas or whatever at 23, and then they boomerang back at 32 with a kid and a wife and want to be closer to family and all that stuff. I get that. And I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to tune that down. I think the better argument is, what about that kid who's in Georgia Tech right now as a senior saying, I can't wait to graduate because those jobs and the lifestyle is waiting for me up in Pierre, Michigan.
Yeah.
I need to be a part of that Detroit Motor City madness that's all going on there. Grand Rapids. the Acrisure Amphitheater is opening up this weekend.
Right.
And they got a soccer team coming, and like just Michigan's on fire, and that's where the jobs and the community and the cost of living and the fresh coast and all of the value proposition things we have. I don't think we're doing a good enough job on bringing those people in to counterbalance the people that are going out. Because there are people at the University of Tennessee who are still going to go to Colorado or Texas or Chicago or wherever, even though people from here are going to Tennessee. So we're all going to shuffle the deck a little bit. I just don't think we do enough on inbound population recruiting of students and other universities to come to Michigan for their job and their lifestyle and cost of living.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And we've also talked about, the classic, we do get a good boomerang effect with MSU, and that's really important. And I always talk about, like, before they leave, ideally they have that at least a first internship or first job or something, because then they have some sort of professional network here to come back to, which really helps. And, having that's kind of done that myself with South Carolina and Charleston. It's like if I didn't have have Bob call me to offer me a job, like I wouldn't have moved back to Michigan, at least not so soon. But like it helps to have that sort of, like, when you're coming back, you already know people. Have some sort of baseline. But I also think the out-of-state experience is valuable for people, and that's one thing we talked about is, like, Lansing also can feel like a bigger, more asset-rich or amenity-rich region to people that are from northern Michigan or something like that and went to a smaller school like an Alma or even Central. Like Mount Pleasant is different and smaller than Lansing in a lot of ways. And like we felt like we weren't really targeting those sorts of communities, like smaller communities within Michigan, or same with Ohio, Indiana, that are like a drive away.
Right.
But I agree. The Pure Michigan campaign has been epically good, but it's also been, cut funding over the years. And
it's tourism. It's come visit.
Exactly.
But maybe you can get the hooks in.
The relocation and Choose Michigan. There's been some efforts around that to try to get into talent relocation. It's hard. It's a loud, messy landscape out there. Everyone's seeking attention of, these people that are making these decisions. Right. I think we just have to, the place has to speak for itself. And the more you can do that, you mentioned Fresh Coast. They have that awesome up in Marquette film festival called Fresh Coast. And like that, it's that sort of thing, right? That gets someone excited and they come here from all around the country, all around the world to go to that thing in Marquette, and they kayak pictured rocks while they're there and stuff.
Right.
You need those sorts of
ice
experiences.
Fest up in Munising.
Yeah.
Got really all four cool sports teams are doing pretty well in Detroit. All that stuff matters, right? To just build the brand.
But the quality of place is huge. And I do think we've maybe lost our way a little bit in that regard, because we have the tourism marketing, I think, pretty well down. but it's less about sort of relocate and what are all those things you need to do to decide where to live.
Right. Well, I want to give a nod to our friends at Keller Williams, and we all need a place to call home, and Chris Silker of Keller Williams Advantage and Team offers the expertise that you're looking for. He's helped clients navigate the complicated world of real estate in mid-Michigan for over 10 years, providing the best information possible at the right time to empower the best decisions. Whether you're a first-time home buyer looking for a local expert to guide you from point A to point B, searching for an income property in the competitive Lansing market, right-sizing your life, or searching for your dream home, Chris Silker and the Advantage and Team is the name to trust in Greater Lansing real estate. Visit advantageandteam.com or give Chris Silker a call directly at 517-242-9251 today to find the home of your dreams. So, you know, I unfortunately get myself sucked in on some of these social media battles, but I mean, it is a way to kind of stay informed on development projects. It is a decent source of news, and then you just got to decide whether you want to play games in the comments
and some level of gauging community sentiment. I will say I think it's a very incomplete picture,
no question,
because of the people that participate, right?
And you have bots, you know, but in just very recent history, I mean, you have the Eagle site, you know, basically turned off. Right. So no to battery plants, pretty much no to some. I mean, we've got the one battery plant for sure, which is wonderful and a great win, and I think is going to provide great jobs. So I'm not disparaging to that.
600 or 700 hired already. So,
yeah, right. There you go. But you know, semiconductors, data centers, high rises in downtown East Lansing. I mean, just the piling on. And again, one of my mentors told me when I was going into my first public comments on a semi-contentious development project that I was advocating for as a staffer in a local municipality, he told me, he's like, you know, and I was in a township setting that had about 45,000 people. He said, if 45 people come up and speak for 3 minutes and we're here for a day and a half to hear them all speak, you will have heard from 0.1% of our population.
Right.
So you get the loud and angry minority, and elected officials can sometimes bow to, this is what the community thinks of this project. Right. So I worry, you know,
it's somehow representative, right? The
exactly.
People that show up and I love, democracy in action, right? Like people speaking out public, like it's super important. And, and we obviously respect that. But it can be really challenging. It's just like, how are you really gauging where your community's at on certain topics that people get super fired up and passionate about? And there's all sorts of spreading of misinformation and all sorts of sort of discounting expert opinions on things and like third party validated information that is just like, oh, well, that's not, you know, that's not it. That's my 30 minutes on YouTube, and I know more. And honestly,
or they show up at the 11th hour and have the kind of the big macro. Well, we can't do that because of this problem. It's like, that was kind of discussed and solved in the first chapter 12 months ago.
Right. Like that's
so
it's already
if
been
you're going to join the
you're
conversation,
being a dead horse, and
it's wrong, and it's already been disproved.
And it's really hard because particularly, data centers have been a big one lately. Yeah. And it's like,
not all data. Data centers deserve to be scrutinized. There needs to be guardrails. You know, they're not all the same, and there are things that they can do that are disruptive to a community. Right. And so you want to hold them accountable and have standards and all that kind of stuff.
There's a serious conversation about pros and cons. There's a lot of project-specific elements to it. But the challenge, the most frustrating thing I see is where people kind of bring in this existential threat at like a humanity scale of like AI, and AI not being ethical, or it's too powerful and like lack of control, and like you're not regulating AI at a local level. Right. You know, like when you're up at the podium, you're talking about land use or something related to like zoning and like impact on immediate residents and neighbors, or again, like the utility rates. Like there's a lot of things that you want to unpack and understand. Like, are my utility rates going to go up? Well, it's state law, they can't, right? Water usage, like if it's not closed loop, they can be water guzzlers, but almost all of them modern are closed loop and, you know, one-time fill and then don't use much water. But that's the challenge or the environmental health stuff is also challenging, because you read one kind of article that like media clickbait that's like, you know, Amazon where just a data center causes cancer, and you look into that and it's like, well, what was the pollutant? Fertilizer from a farm field. Well, how did that become the water source for that data center? Well, because the water treatment plant didn't take the nitrates out properly. It's like, oh, and then so the data center's only thing that they did wrong was they took in water that was unclean and they evaporated, which concentrated those pollutants, and then put it back out. When it puts back out to a wastewater treatment plant, it again didn't fix the nitrate issue, and then it went into the water supply, right? So like the data center really didn't do anything wrong there. They weren't the polluter, and they just took in water and then spit out water, like, which was total, like everything was legal.
And the actual
perfect.
story is that actually the farms are maybe the larger polluters.
Yeah, but I mean, who reads the whole article, right? So it's a clickbait headline, and then I mean I don't even know how many times I saw that in the Facebook comments and stuff. It's like data centers cause cancer, and it's like people want to be able to say that without unpacking like the one example where that was a thing. And so it's really hard because it gets super emotional, and then people, I mean, I have a lot of cancer in my family. Like, I get it.
Right.
Cancer sucks, but like you can't make a boogeyman out of a freaking warehouse with a lot of servers in it that uses, I mean, it's converting electricity into information. That's what a data center does. It's digital infrastructure of our generation. We all crave it all the time. Right. Whether you're streaming Netflix or, depending on health records to be transmitted instantaneously, everything uses data centers. And I mean, AI is a piece of it, and AI is like accelerating the track on which we need energy to be converted to information. Right. But it's just where the world's headed, and these things will be built all around the world. They're being built like crazy in China and other countries, and in the U.S. It's just, right. So like the existential stuff is happening regardless. Right. And like you don't get to decide that at a local level. All you get to decide is how are you mitigating the negative and maximizing the positive. Or if you just shut your doors, your neighbor's probably going to say yes, because it's a really net positive thing, especially for local governments that are struggling financially. Right. So, the NIMBYism, I think a lot of people have heard of that phrase, so not in my backyard. And then the other one I heard is the banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Yes, yeah. So people are just stake in the ground, don't change anything. And I struggle with all of that because what I have experienced, and again, I haven't been at any of the public forums for Eagle or, or the data centers. I've been watching peripherally. But my experience for things that are contentious, the folks that show up are the people that are going to probably suffer the most, assuming they stay 20 years from now, right? Because the people that show up tend to be 55, 65-year-old folks that have been here. They have the time to pay attention, the intellect to maybe ask some questions, and the ability to show up and put that all together, which, again, everybody has a voice. But a lot of these things are decisions that are going to affect the 20-year-olds. These are the jobs and the lifestyle that people, are hoping to be here in Michigan for. The BRT was really one of the capstone examples of bus rapid transit from whatever that was, 2016. A decade ago now, but that was it. I sat there and watched the 60-plus contingents coming through saying it was a horrible idea. Right. And I'm like, well, we're not building this for you. We're building this for the kids at MSU now. My kids, your kid, because public transportation is more important to this generation coming up than it is to someone who grew up in a GM town, in the 60s and 70s. Right. And I actually heard someone comment and basically said, this community right now would have said no to RE Olds 100 years ago. Yeah. The idea of why would we make cars? I mean, that's, like data centers and solar field, and batteries and data centers. And buggies work fine, right? Yeah, right. Nothing wrong with that. Exactly. So I just, I guess the question I have is what can be done in your estimation to try to bring in a younger faction, whether it's just kind of listening groups or here's how to get involved in your community or here are the best resources to pay attention to development projects that if they don't come, might affect you negatively. And we need you we need your voice at the table. Yeah. Because I think it's really kind of one-sided, I don't know, in some of the public hearings. Yeah. And so again, you get these elected officials that hear what they think is community sentiment, but it's a small group of people that are upset about something. Yeah. It's really, that's a big challenge, and I mean, you just naturally, you build up relationship capital and sort of soft power as you age and you know more people, and particularly in small communities, it's kind of a microcosm where the elected officials are up there in age oftentimes, and the people they're most impacted, affected by, have the same thing where they've built relationships over time. And those, like you said, those are the people that have the time and interest, for good reason, I think, interest in issues going on with their local government. They show up. You have a lot of people, I think, that are interested, but I mean, the time and effort when you have, that 2-year-old, like the idea of, I'm, my role at LEAP, like I'm very community oriented in my job and in my home life, but like the idea of going to a contentious 3-hour Meridian Township meeting to speak on a topic, it's brutal. Like I would probably do it depending on the issue. When it was our local school that was, Cornell School was looking at potentially going across Grand River. I still did it remotely by like sending in correspondence versus attending a meeting. Cause it's like, I'm on for bedtime with Avery that night, right? Like I'm not going to put my wife out by doing that. So it's those sorts of little opportunity cost situations. But I think people in their 30s, 40s, 50s with families do really care. There's just not maybe the easiest channel for them to participate because again, like the idea of going to, and now like a lot more meetings are happening virtual. But some of that's going away again, where you can send in a letter or something, but like the whole, you can't do public comment virtually or call in anymore. Like a lot of them are going back to like, you got to be in person, especially the bigger local governments, which kind of cuts both ways. Because that was one of the interesting things about the pandemic. You got a lot of different people because the accessibility was less of an issue. And time, you could kind of sit, you could have a baby crying on your lap as you're waiting for your 2 minutes to speak. Right. So it's like stuff like you're not going to go into City Hall and do that. But it's a huge issue. And I don't know the obvious answer. I know that awareness and education across everybody is really important in what we're doing with our strategy. But you really need to, you're right, you need to reach different people and try to get cross sections. And we also, with like Deep Green in the city of Lansing was really interesting because you had, it was very split. You had generally the people that were against were, I would characterize them as generally seniors. But then you also had this contingent of MSU students that we come to find out are getting class credit for like going and participating. And their whole kind of thing was anti-data center. So every single one of those students, there were maybe 10 or 15 of them, was like speaking against it. And it's like, well, was there an opportunity for MSU students that maybe have the other side of the coin that are like, tech focused and understand the value of data centers? Like I didn't hear that voice once. So it just felt kind of contrived, right? Where like you're getting these different groups, and then like labor was obviously very much for building data centers. You have super high end technical electricians and things making great wages. Yeah, like, we want those jobs in the region. They want to build these things, and if they're not building them in Michigan, they're going to leave and go build them where they can, in Indiana, Ohio, South Carolina, wherever. But it's a really big point. I don't know if there's a golden bullet. We're trying to get better about doing like scientific polling on key issues to help elected officials understand that there's a lot more to their own community sentiment than they see, so they don't fall prey to fear mongering in that really loud minority that you mentioned. But even then, it's a packed room with 100 people and people are hotly contesting. It's really easy to do a recall petition. That's a big threat. And people don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to have their kids threatened in schools. I mean, all that is happening today.
I know.
There's like no guardrails anymore. And it's not just a policy discussion. Again, it's like this existential threat where people are getting semi-violent in their words and or actions. And it's not cool. And like, I don't know how to cure that or fix that. And it's also just a symptom of like society at large, where I think people feel like they have no control in what's happening in the world, in the country. And the only way they can really exert any power is to lash out at local things, right? So when a new development comes up, change, to your point, like everything's changing so chaotically at more of a national and global level. It's like, this is the one place I can get up at the podium and like speak truth to power, and like I can do that, but it might be misguided. Right. And yet if it makes you feel good, and if you rally around this, like, it's a lot easier to be anti something than for something.
Correct.
And, I think some of it's that even people just are being social in a nice way in these like anti groups because they're rallying around a common cause. And it's just really interesting to think about it from that perspective too. Like, I'm trying to put myself in their shoes and also give them the information and present information maybe contrary to their viewpoint that could stick a little bit better because it's, from that perspective, but it's hard. Yeah. I feel like we're all navigating that in our day-to-day lives, and, family members with distinctly different viewpoints, and a lot of family members have been, alienated and or ostracized and or, they're no longer part of the family. We don't talk anymore. Right. And over politics, and like, that's crazy in this country, like, to be so divisive. But I think some of that is like feeding into local politics too.
Right. Well, I would like to spend the closing little segment here talking about the positive stuff, because I'll tell you, Michigan's got a lot of great stuff going on. I mean, locally and across the state. I mean, I just off the top of my head, we got the new amphitheater, Riverfront Amphitheater, opening this weekend in Grand Rapids. We got a new soccer stadium that's about half a mile from where that is, also on the river in Grand Rapids. We've got a new it's not an MLS, but it's one notch below that, and it's being built to those standards so they can hopefully be an expansion team in Detroit, being built in Corktown. The teams are doing
new pro
well.
Women's hockey team in Detroit too. I saw just got announced.
Exactly. I need to get them on the show.
Yeah,
I mean, University of Michigan basketball is national champions, as hard as that is for our green and white fans. But hockey.
It just raises
booming.
The stakes of the competition, the in-state rivalry, and everything.
Right. We got Ovations under construction for a live music venue here in Lansing.
Lansing's tallest building down the street.
Exactly.
Is being built,
New Vision Lansing's gonna be taller than Bogey
You got a $3
Tower.
billion battery plant that's up and running, and we'll be supplying a $4 billion contract with Tesla. So
do you think there's any sense that people are saying, and I mean in downtown East Lansing, I have to give my tip of the cap and my real Reader's Digest version of that is when I moved here in 2008, East Lansing looked like 1970.
Yeah.
And now it looks like maybe 2015.
Right.
And
that was basically, it's funny. That was like right when I started college at MSU. And like, that was my impression too. Like there's 50,000 kids here. And why is this our downtown?
Exactly.
Right. Even just coming from Southeast Michigan, it's like, why does this downtown look more piddly than Rochester or Royal Oak? Like,
right.
What is happening here?
Right. And you go to other Big Ten universities and again, it's sprawl, not density.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you find out there's 3,000 housing units, 2-3 miles away from campus.
And you have the whole
like
Hannah Plaza area, and you've got Skyview.
Where's
and Red
the density
Cedar.
that warrants, having a Big Ten university across the street, right?
Right.
And like I think they've fixed a lot of that. They're on the right track at least. And Skyline looks so different than 2008, right?
Yep. And there's a chance though to continue that.
Yes.
And I think people's appetites are waning a little bit. And again, I think a lot of those people are like, you harken back to, I went to MSU in the 90s, and it was the best time of my life.
We're losing the nostalgic
we're losing
sort of
the
vibe
soul and the vibe and all that stuff. But my argument, I guess, for all of this is Michigan and all of the cities within it need to be way more aggressive to compete. I mean, MSU is doing a lot of things really, really well to compete more and than they ever have done, whether it's campus changes or curriculum changes. I mean, the MSU, the Research Foundation is on fire, creating the best.
They've had a phenomenal decade of new and better, and
unbelievable.
Great programs.
So there's so much stuff going on to kind of keep things moving. And I'm finding more and more kind of resistance on this next wave of keeping things going.
Yeah.
And I discovered economic development here in Michigan. And so my mind in economic development is compete, foot on the gas pedal, mash to the floor, offense. And then I've gone to national and global seminars, and you tell stories about, Charleston, South Carolina growing 50%, or Madison growing 50% in the next 25 years. And I learned from my counterparts at those seminars that they're like, no. We're trying to slow things down.
Right.
We're trying to be way more selective with our proactive zoning policies. And our problems are, how do we make good accessory dwelling unit ordinances? Because we got to figure out how to house all these inbound
I remember
people.
having that conversation in Portland, Oregon.
And how do we get better funding for our light rail system? And how do we incorporate better transit? And so the problems of some of these other cities are wildly different than
local
what we're
conditions,
dealing with here.
local problems different. And yet they're being resource constrained and resource depleted is it's just a worse bargaining position.
Correct.
There's some leaders in our region that feel like, we're kind of this thing that everybody wants. And it's like, you have to understand that competitive reality, right? And it's like the idea of not using incentives in certain places in any way, shape or form, or just saying absolutely not is, that same developer nationally can go to a million other places and have a better it's all about build pro formas, right?
Yep.
It's always a business case. As much as there's like pull on the heartstrings and they love our community, we have to get back to that business case. Right. And that it's just the reality that if there's certain incentives or tax structures offered in other places that aren't offered here, that puts us at a disadvantage. So it's really hard. But you're right. That people lose the relativity. They don't know what's going on outside maybe, or they have a small bubble, but we are always competing. We're always competing, and that neighbor down the street that just moved, you don't know why, right?
Right.
Like, they left and went to Nashville. There's like that stuff's happening all the time. And we're also bringing people in. Dylan on our team just golfed with somebody who had an Irish accent. He started talking to this guy. It's like he moved from Ireland because Glambia as a company didn't have a lot of opportunities there. So he started in New Mexico at their Southwest Cheese and moved to MWC Midwest Cheese in St. John's. And now he's, golfing and and hanging out and living here. And it's just like, I mean, people don't know about that guy either. But like we need to, it's back to that leaky bucket. We need more new than, and that's how in-migration works. It's all net, right? We're going to lose people. We got to gain more.
And I just think about college athletics. I mean, it would be like Izzo or MSU football basically just saying, we don't believe in NIL or the transfer portal.
That's a great
parallel. We're not going to participate.
Right.
It's like, well, incentives and all that stuff could be regulated on a national level, at a federal level if that needed to be. But
we advocate for regulation, but we're just not going to do anything until then. Right?
Right. You're not going to put a competitive product on the field if you're not competing against the people you're playing against.
That's exactly it. You can't not participate. You can't not play the game because you think it's not fair or rigged or you don't like the system. Like it's the systems exist.
And there's a place to advocate for changing
Absolutely.
the system.
And we're right there with a lot of that, right?
Right.
And yet, the competitive activities of people, places, and investment, like that's happening every day. And we got to be on the top of our game. So that's why we're kind of telling the story of the population information, and we're building the strategy with that as really a key underpinning. We got to figure out in-migration. We have to build compelling places. We have to be attractive to investment. So that's what we're working on. Well,
maybe we'll do a part 2 where you or any of your teammates can kind of come in and talk about maybe LEAP's evolution of your thought based on this data. I know most of this conversation was kind of slanted towards negative, really to try to spur creative thought on how we change the course of what they're saying is going to happen if we do what we're doing.
And I get what you mean, but like PSC, they had no sort of preconceived notion of how it should look coming out. Like some of it was shocking to us.
Right.
When you see a specific school district that's enrollment's down 25-30% over a few years, and I mean it was really interesting to say nothing else. And it means a lot for us, and I think people should care about it. And it's a lot of people don't like to dive into data and things, but I mean the sports metaphor, like we just have to make this relatable and understandable for people. And I think that's part of the challenge too, is translating this to how does the deep grade data center have anything to do with this population? It's like, well, it's all related. We need tax base.
Right.
We need new people, right? Like we need to be doing these things in order for people's quality of life to not get worse, get better. We all want to get better, right?
Well, we appreciate you coming in today, Keith, CEO of LEAP, the Lansing Economic Area, COO of LEAP, Lansing Economic Area Partnership, talking about the 2050 growth trajectory for the state of Michigan and mid-Michigan. A lot of stuff to unpack, a lot of stuff to discuss, but certainly it needs to be a story, needs to be told. And I'm happy to tell it, and I'll continue to tell it. So keep giving me information like LEAP always does.
We will.
And I'd love to give a final shout out to all the loyal sponsors. We got Wagoner Financial, Good Marketing, Triterra Environmental, Keller Williams Advantage and Team, Michigan Rise, Kirk Byron State Farm, and the attorneys at Foster Swift. All great people doing wonderful work. And if you found Michigan Reimagined as a one-off, I'd like you to like and subscribe to Michigan Reimagined everywhere you find your podcasts. This is Chris Buck signing off for Michigan Reimagined.